Welcome to our news update. Today we have some interesting stories from around the world. First up,
the Canadian government has proposed a ban on assault-style firearms. This comes after a mass shooting in Nova Scotia that left 22 people dead. Next,
Japan is set to ban upskirting in sweeping sex crime reforms. This is a big step forward in protecting women's rights.
Moving on.
1 in 5 young people in Chinese cities are out of work. Beijing wants them to work in the fields to help with the country's food security. In other news,
the Russian political opposition has signed a declaration in Europe against Putin's regime and war in Ukraine. This is a significant move in the ongoing conflict. In Germany,
a €49 monthly ticket for nationwide public transport has been launched. This is a great initiative to encourage people to use public transport more. Finally,
we have an exclusive story about a never-before-seen Chinese military blimp caught on satellite images of a remote desert base. This is a fascinating discovery.
So, let's get started and dive into these stories.
The Canadian government is proposing a ban on assault-style firearms that would apply once legislation now before Parliament comes into force.
The government plans to make regulations through the Firearms Act to ensure that guns are classified correctly before entering the Canadian market.
The ban is aimed at protecting families, children, and communities, and not targeting hunters and law-abiding gun owners, according to Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino.
The government also plans to recreate a firearms advisory committee that will make recommendations on the classification of guns now on the market.
The committee will include rural and northern residents, Indigenous people, industry leaders, law enforcement, and gun control advocates.
Gun control group Policies Vivient denounced the new plan, accusing the government of proposing a watered-down definition that would apply only to future models and could be easily circumvented.
From banning assault-style firearms to banning upskirting, it seems like the world is finally taking a stand against things that go bang and things that go click. Singapore has strict laws against voyeurism.
Those convicted of voyeurism can face up to 2 years in jail.
Fines and caning are also possible penalties for voyeuristic crimes.
If the victim is younger than 14 years old, mandatory imprisonment is required.
The combination of penalties can be applied to those convicted of voyeurism.
These laws aim to protect individuals from being violated by voyeuristic behavior.
Well, it looks like Japan is cracking down on inappropriate photography. But in China, they're just hoping their unemployed youth can find a field to work in. Literally.
Guangdong, China's richest province, plans to send 300,000 unemployed young people to the countryside for 2 to 3 years to find work, as the jobless rate among China's youth soars.
The plan aims to help college graduates and young entrepreneurs find work in villages and encourage rural youth to return to the countryside to look for jobs.
The announcement followed President Xi Jinping's call last December for urban youth to seek jobs in rural areas to revitalize the rural economy, echoing a previous campaign launched by former leader Mao Zedong.
The youth unemployment rate in China's cities and towns has surged to 19.6%, the second highest level on record, with about 11 million jobless youth, according to CNN calculations.
The surging unemployment among young people is largely a result of China's economic slowdown, with the government's now defunct draconian COVID policy and regulatory crackdown on internet, real estate, and education companies hitting the private sector hard.
Analysts point out that Xi's countryside policy may also be aimed at addressing the kind of widespread youth unemployment that could trigger social unrest, as disaffected youth can foment unrest and detract from social stability.
Well, if the young people in China don't want to work in the fields, maybe they can join the Russian political opposition and protest Putin's regime instead.
68 Russian opposition figures and activists who left the country have signed a joint declaration calling for the elimination of Putin's regime and the release of political prisoners and prisoners of war.
The declaration recognizes the war in Ukraine as criminal and demands the withdrawal of Russian troops from all occupied territories.
The signatories also demand the restoration of Russia's internationally recognized borders and the prosecution of war criminals.
The regime of Russian President Vladimir Putin is deemed illegitimate and criminal, and must be eliminated, according to the declaration.
The activists also call for an end to imperial policy at home and abroad and the return of forcibly displaced persons and abducted Ukrainian children.
The signatories pledge to support the declaration until the achievement of these strategic goals and call on Russians to join them.
From political opposition to public transportation, it seems like Europe is finally getting its act together. Who knows, maybe Putin will even take the train to Ukraine next time.
Germany has launched a new flat-rate public transport ticket, the Deutschland ticket, which offers unlimited access to the country's bus and metro systems, as well as local and regional trains, for €49 per month.
The pass will be available for the months of June, July, and August 2022, and policymakers hope it will bring relief for consumers amid soaring inflation and encourage people to favor mass transit in the name of the environment.
The pass has been called the biggest public transport reform in German history by Transport Minister Volker Wissing, but its success is far from assured.
The Association of German Transport Companies expects 16 million of the country's 84 million inhabitants to take up the offer, and roughly 750,000 tickets have been sold already.
The financing of the new policy was the subject of months of debate, with the federal government and Germany's states both contributing 1.5 billion euros towards the tickets financing to avoid adding to the national rail operators' debt pile.
The success of similar initiatives in Spain and Austria has led to a boom in rail traffic, but critics argue that the money could have been used to improve and renovate rail infrastructure instead.
From trains to blimps, it seems like Germany's public transport system is really taking off. Speaking of taking off, have you seen the latest addition to China's military arsenal?
Satellite imagery obtained by CNN shows a large blimp developed by the Chinese military at a remote base in the desert of northwestern China.
Aerospace experts say the blimp could signal a notable advancement in China's airship program, demonstrating a more versatile and maneuverable craft than previously seen or known.
The blimp appears to have dedicated propulsion and navigation capabilities, which would allow it to loiter over an area for an extended period.
The blimp's appearance at a Chinese military facility marks a notable transition in Chinese blimp technology and research, as past Chinese airships and accomplishments have been constructed by research institutions and universities.
The PLA program uses all three types of airships: blimps, aerostats, and free-floating balloons.
The Chinese military has recently created a unit to oversee airship technology, and the large hangar complex at the base suggests the PLA has significantly loftier goals for its airship program.